Once again, we'll turn to Ecclesiastes, chapter 2, which is the fruitless search for lasting satisfaction apart from God. He says in verse 1, I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this is also vanity. Again, Solomon is speaking to himself, as is indicated there in verse 1. He discovers in verses 1 through 11 that lasting fulfillment and happiness, again, apart from God, is not found in possessions. He mentions in verses 1 through 3 the vanity of personal pleasures. He mentions that he sought lasting fulfillment and satisfaction, happiness, and enjoyments and pleasures, amusements, gratifications. And he comes to the conclusion, this also is vanity. In verse 2, he speaks of laughter, again, pleasure, comedy, frivolity, speaks of festivity. He discovers again that there is no lasting fulfillment, no lasting satisfaction in these things apart from God. Again, people seek these things today to escape reality, to avoid taking life too seriously. It's more as a madman's approach to life, but it does not accomplish lasting fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness. Again, he says all these things he's not proving, he's not setting out to prove that these things are vanity, but he's setting out to prove, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. In verse 3, he speaks of the vanity of wine or indulgence, wisdom, and foolishness or folly. He speaks of the vanity of earthly accumulations, verses 4 through 7. He says, I made me great works in order to find lasting fulfillment and happiness. That was the purpose. He undertook one project after another. He's kept busy accumulating what he thought would bring him personal, lasting satisfaction. He moves from one thing to another as you read those verses 4 through verse 8. In those verses you see he says, I made me, I builded me, I planted me. Verse 5, I made me, I planted. Verse 6, I made me. Verse 7, I got me and I had. Verse 8, I gathered, I gat me. But again, the result of all his efforts, verse 9, so I was great and increased. And his efforts brought him increase. His efforts provided him accumulations, more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. And then in verse 10, he again states, verse 11, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. That is, apart from God, There was no profit. No profit as far as lasting fulfillment, lasting satisfaction, lasting happiness. And then in verses 12 through 17, he says, lasting fulfillment and happiness is not found in earthly wisdom. It's not found there either. He speaks of three approaches of life. Verse 12, wisdom, that is, one can live their life prudently. Orderly, it's an orderly approach to life, but again, it's apart from God. And one can live their life in madness, irrational, wild, reckless behavior, pleasure-seeking. One can live their life in folly, that is, the rejection of truth, foolishness and ignorance. And people live their lives in one of those three ways. But he comes to the conclusion that even if you live your life, again, apart from God, if you live your life in a prudent, orderly way, there's still no lasting satisfaction, fulfillment, or happiness. He does say that wisdom exceedeth folly. That is, it most certainly is better to live your life prudently and orderly, but apart from God, it doesn't give lasting fulfillment, but it is better than folly, foolishness. It is better than living in madness. And he went on to say, the fool, the wise man's eyes are in his head. That is, he has some insight, which makes his life better. But again, there's no lasting fulfillment there apart from God. And he says, the fool walketh in darkness. And certainly there's no fulfillment there. But then he goes on in verse 16. He considers all of this. And he says, how dieth the wise man has the fool. Death comes to both. The end is the same. Apart from God, the end is the same. The wise man has a better life upon earth than the fool. No question about that. But again, apart from God, the end is the same. So his conclusion is it's vanity as far as lasting fulfillment, lasting happiness. And then in verses 18 through 26, he speaks of labor with the goal of acquiring riches. And again, he comes to the conclusion that this also is vanity. Again, apart from God, seeking fulfillment in work in order to acquire riches, it's going to prove to be empty. Work and vocation are gifts. They are gifts, but when they are apart from God, they turn into terrible gods that will suck the life out of an individual. Again, I believe work and vocation are gifts from God. I don't believe that work is part of the curse. I believe Adam and Eve worked prior to the fall. They tended the garden. It's not a curse, but when it's apart from God, it is. It does not accomplish what people think it's going to accomplish. And Solomon knew by personal experience this sad truth, that work or vocation apart from God turns into a god. that again just drains an individual of life. So in these verses 12 through, or verse 18 through verse 26, Solomon comes to the sad realization about labor and accumulation apart from God. And this is a lesson that many of God's people have never learned. Labor, what comes of that labor, apart from God, it's a curse. And it becomes a false God. So what is accomplished through the toils of life, he says in verse 18, will be left to someone else, because the end is death, whether life be lived wisely or foolishly. The end is death. And it may be left to someone who did not toil for it. Notice in verse 18, yea, I hated all my labor, which I had taken under the sun. How many people just absolutely hate their jobs? But if you view it as a gift from God, it's different. But this is apart from God. Because I should, and the reason he hated it is because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And that's true of all. Because the end result is death. Whatever you accumulate is going to be left to someone else. Verse 20, therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. He's reached a point where he's looking back on his labor and he's saying, what use was it? What good did it accomplish? I didn't find lasting happiness there. I didn't find lasting fulfillment. Again, apart from God. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity. Again, it's approach to life. He approaches work prudently and orderly, keeps everything in proper perspective. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it. You may leave it all to someone who hasn't done a thing. For his portion, this also is vanity and a great evil. So seeing the vanity of his achievements and their transitory nature, he's led to a sense of despair. He says, I may leave it to someone who never lifted their finger for any of these things. The fruit of one's toil may be left to someone who will squander it. Verse 19, and who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or fool? That is, who you leave it to. You may have exercised great prudence in your labor, and you've accumulated. But the person that is left to may be a fool. They're going to waste it. Yet shall he have rule over all labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. So he's brought to see the vanity of leaving what you've accumulated to someone who's just going to waste it. We've seen it happen many times. Parents, grandparents leave wealth to a son or a daughter or a grandchild who wastes it. Wasted on drugs. Wasted on alcohol. We've seen it over and over. It's all waste. It's all waste. And people say, oh, they'd roll over in their grave if they saw that. Well, they're not going to see it. They're not going to roll over in their grave. But it's a waste. It's vanity. Again, apart from God. when you view it all apart from God, what use is it? He goes on, he mentions the toil for lasting fulfillment and happiness apart from God. It's all for naught. Verse 22 and 23. For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. The real issue in verses 22 and 23 is not between labor and rest, but between meaningless and meaningful activity. And all toil to find personal, lasting fulfillment and happiness apart from God. It's meaningless because it does not accomplish what you're looking for. Lasting fulfillment. He says here in verse 22 and 23 that it's vexation of spirit. That is, to labor for happiness, to labor for fulfillment. It's a vexation of spirit. And it brings sorrows. And it brings travail. It brings grief. And he says, it's all vanity. It's all vanity. The position of the heart in relation to the temporal he speaks of in verse 24 through 26. He says, there is nothing better for a man that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. That's all he can expect apart from God. Labor provides food, it provides drink, it provides some enjoyment in the things that you accumulate. That's all you have apart from God. This also I saw that it was from the hand of God. That is, God enables us to work, God gives us a vocation, and God allows us to enjoy the accumulations of labor. But if it's all apart from God, that's where it ends. That's where it ends. Verse 25, for one can eat, for who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also was vanity and vexation of spirit. So Solomon has found through his own personal experience that lasting satisfaction, lasting happiness is not found in accumulation. It's not where it's found. Well, if I can just get this, I will be happy. No, you won't. Because that's not where happiness and satisfaction is found. So in these verses, Solomon comes to the conclusion that man should view life and the things of life, the things you can accumulate, the possessions, as a gift from God, and enjoy it in that way. It is a gift of God. Just enjoy it that way. Whatever you accumulate, whatever God has allowed you to possess, realize it's a gift from God and enjoy it in that way rather than pursuing happiness and satisfaction in these things. Just view it for what it is. It's a gift from God. And you can enjoy it to a degree in this life. But after that, it's nothing. It does not provide lasting happiness. So what he's basically telling us is view temporal things as coming from God's hand. This is a gift from God. You say, well, no, it isn't. I worked hard for that. Well, you may have. But God gave you the ability to do that. And God provided the vocation to do that. It's all a gift. It's all a gift from God. Do not abuse God's gifts. And it happens all the time. God gives the gift of possessions, accumulation, and then God's people use it against God. And those things are put above God. And that's, again, it happens all the time. But just realize the temporal is a gift from God. Enjoy it in that way. You're not going to find lasting enjoyment. You're not going to find lasting satisfaction or happiness. But enjoyment, true enjoyment, hinges on a relationship with God. Has nothing to do with what we accumulate. So Solomon is brought to this fact. True enjoyment of life is impossible apart from God. It's impossible. The child of God ought to enjoy life. No one ought to enjoy life more than a child of God. So we ought to enjoy life thanking God for every temporal blessing that comes our way. Unlike the foolish person that's mentioned there in verse 26, we're to just enjoy what God has given us. We ought to enjoy life thanking God for the temporal, not like the fool who sets their heart upon the temporal, basing their entire life upon it. So it comes down to this. It's a matter of where the heart is positioned. God gives possessions. God allows us to have possessions. And to have a degree of enjoyment in those things. But the real matter is where our heart is positioned. So it's what Jesus spoke of. Notice over in Matthew 6, very familiar verse. Matthew 6, verse 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth. That doesn't mean that you're not to have anything on earth. That's not what it means. And that's explained. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt. That is, these things aren't lasting. And where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Again, it's a matter of where the heart is positioned. In Luke chapter 12, verse 16, and he spake a parable unto them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. Nothing wrong with that. And he thought within himself, here's where the problem comes in. What shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruit? So God has abundantly blessed him. And he said, here's the problem. This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, So thou hast much goods laid up. So he's looking for satisfaction in all these things for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God, he's left God out. Nothing wrong with having earthly success and being blessed plentifully. But he said he's looking for fulfillment, and he thinks he can find satisfaction in this. Thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Again, remember Ecclesiastes. Death comes to the wise man, death comes to the fool. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? It's also what Paul spoke of in 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17 through 19. Charge them that are rich in this world. Again, it's not necessarily a sin to be rich in the world. That they be not high-minded, there's your sin. Nor trust, here's your sin again, in uncertain riches. No matter how rich you are in material things, they're uncertain. It's all uncertain. But in the living God, rather than trusting in riches, trust in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy, which we've just got through speaking about. Look at temporal blessings as gifts from God. Enjoy them in that realm. That they do good, that they be rich in good works. That's what they're to exhort them to do. Ready to distribute. That is, ready to share your possessions. Willing to communicate. You're ready to distribute it to whoever, and you're willing to share. Laying up in store for themselves a good foundation. Again, these things are not the foundation, but lay up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. It's what James speaks of in James chapter 5. James chapter 5 and verse 3. Your gold, verse 2, your riches are corrupted, your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. And ye shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. So what Solomon is saying in Ecclesiastes 2, verses 24 through 26, is that the material, the temporal, no doubt, is a large part of daily life. You can't live without it. You can live without many things, but there are certain things you can't live without. Food, clothing. Again, the material is a large part of daily life, but there must be a proper spiritual perspective concerning it. It must be kept in its place. It must never be moved out of its place. You will not find happiness. You will not find satisfaction lasting. So the child of God must realize the fleeting nature of the material. And the Bible tells us over and over of the fleeting nature of the material. It doesn't matter what the material is. It's all fleeting. None of it's going to last. It's all temporary. The satisfaction that comes from it, temporary. The happiness that comes from it, temporary. If you want lasting satisfaction, lasting happiness, lasting fulfillment, fear God. Keep His commandments. Notice in the book of Job, chapter 15, and if anyone understood the fleeting nature of the material, it was Job. Now these are the words of Eliphaz, but verse 29, he shall not be rich, neither shall his substance continue. Neither shall his substance continue. Neither shall he prolong the perfection thereof upon the earth. Job chapter 20 and verse 8. He shall fly away as a dream, and shall not be found. Yea, he shall be chased away as a vision of the night. Proverbs 23. Proverbs 23. Verse 5. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. And so does the satisfaction and the contentment and the happiness that comes from those things. Can vanish in a second. Proverbs 27, verse 24. For riches are not forever, and doth the crown endure to every generation? Riches aren't forever. Position isn't forever. 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7. For we brought nothing into this world, and is certain we can carry nothing out. Not going to happen. And we've already read verses 17 through verse 19 there. But again, do not consume your life with the material. We must not think, and we're very prone to think this way, and a lot of it has to do with American culture, that security is in the material. That's not where security is. You may say, well, my children, my wife, they're all taken care of for long after I'm gone. You don't know that. You don't know that. Because it can vanish just like that. That's not where security is found. You may tell yourself that's where it is, but it's not where it's found. So, you must not think that our security is in the material. The Bible says much about that. Proverbs 10, verse 15. The rich man's wealth is his strong city. That is, he thinks that's where his foundation is. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. In Proverbs, well, we need to stop, but notice in Proverbs 18, verse 11. The rich man's wealth is a strong city, as a high wall in his own conceit. Again, he finds a false security in these things. We must not trust the material. Paul said, labor not to be rich Or Proverbs says, labor not to be rich. Riches may come from labor, but that's not the purpose of labor. Labor not to be rich. That's not the goal of labor. And yet, that's how most people live. And Solomon says, such a lifestyle, again, it's all apart from God. It's all vanity. It's all empty. Does not accomplish what they think it's going to accomplish. So again, we need to learn these lessons that are presented in Ecclesiastes. Let's look to the Lord. Heavenly